Welcome back to my channel, and you did indeed read that title right. I'm going to be doing the entire science of logic in less than 15 minutes. Let's get started. Let's begin with being, right? We have pure, indeterminate being as such. Being immediately passes into nothing or transitions into nothing. As the content of being, that which what being is nothing because it is pure being. In this transition to nothing, we have already instituted the becoming. Through this negation, through this passing of being into nothing, this is the becoming. And this becoming is what we understand as change in the world. In the doctrine of being, let us also establish quantities and qualities, right? You have quantities, for instance, just the idea of a quantity itself and the idea of quality itself. These are taken from Kant's 12 categories, and there's the other 10 categories, but we're only going to talk about these two because we have 15 minutes. Taken the idea of quality, and quantity in the doctrine of being is simply quality qua quality and quantity qua quantity. Now, we can move into the doctrine of essence with the recognition that quantity and quality are always already determined through the essence of what the thing is. Now, let us be more clear. For instance, when we say, here is a chair, we are saying this is a chair, a thisness, and this is a such and such. This is a chair. This and such are both in the idea of the chair. So, what this means is that when we say that the chair is a chair, we can't really abstract things away from the chair and go, no, actually, what makes the chair a chair is X, but this chair has X and Y non-essential qualities. Hegel says, and this is what we recognize in the doctrine of the essence, or the logic of the essence, is that these non-essential qualities of chair will say, like, maybe you think that the material of the chair, what Hegel would say is that, okay, let's go ahead and abstract that material, right? What are we left with? Well, we're left with not really a chair, because what the chair is just what the chair is. We're understanding essence, or what we can say at this point is objectivity, to be simply the self-relation of a thing with a thing. And through each essence of a thing, each essence of a thing existing, there is always a reflection. And this reflection is another important concept that we understand in the doctrine of essence, or the logic of essence. And this reflection is the point that what seems to just be a positing essence is also a positive essence. In the sense, let's use Aristotle's term of accidental. Aristotle says that an accidental or a coincidental attribute of something, Socrates, for instance, is a man. But that itself is not in the essence of Socrates. That is a accidental. Socrates could be a woman or whatever, right? For Aristotle, but Socrates being a man, that's his accidental according to Aristotle. Hegel wants us to recognize that these accidentals aren't really accidental, because what seems to be the essence Socrates positing, the essence that's positing these accidentals, is actually a reflection, whereby the accidental is posited by the essence and thereby negated back into the essence in sort of one movement. There is no we can separate Socrates and separate the manness from Socrates. No, it's Socrates as a man. It's that simple. The manness of Socrates is posited and positing by the essence of Socrates, thereby making the essence of Socrates, what Socrates is, as a dual relationship, right? And this is how we understand the doctrine of essence, or the logic of essence, and the science of logic, is that we have not moved past the notion of all otherness, all difference. The difference is contained in the essence of the thing. Again, Socrates is a man. He is white, or he's, like brown, like light brown skin, whatever you want to say. This is all in the notion, or the essence of Socrates, all right? And we can't really abstract these away. That's what Hegel wants us to recognize, is that what seems to be these accidents are really posited and then reflected in the notion of Socrates. And in another way we can say this is that, because this is a pretty important concept to recognize, is that the transition from being to nothing that happens in the doctrine of being becomes reflection in the doctrine of essence, or the logic of essence, whereby the reflection being, the positing and the posited are both in the essence. There isn't like the essence is positing something outside itself. No, it's already always in the essence, but we still retain a difference between the positing and posited, because there's a difference between that which reflects and that which is reflected in itself. Socrates, as the essence, reflects in itself all of these quote-unquote coincidentals or accidents, according to Aristotle. But these accidents are that which reflects, but they're not reflected in itself. All right? So, moving from there, let's get on to the next part of the doctrine of essence, on to causation. And this will lead us right into the doctrine of the concept. So, Hegel basically says, we think of causation like, oh, well, you have to have a cause to have an effect, duh, right? But what if the cause itself is what if the effect of the cause is itself the cause? What he means by this is that just because effect comes after cause, a cause following this would not be a cause without an effect. Thereby, we have instituted a self-referential, self-reciprocal notion of causation, whereby the effect of the cause is the effect, and the cause of the effect is the cause, right? We've created a reciprocal determination, and this is extremely important because this is sort of moving us into the notion that, all right, we're collapsing otherness, we're collapsing difference, we're moving into self-reciprocal. We've gone beyond at this point, again, the point of the positing and posited contained in the essence, right? This is a self-reciprocal, identical notion. Hegel's dissolving the duality of cause and effect. Radical, absolutely radical shift that occurs at this point. All right, we're almost 7 minutes in. Let's get into the doctrine of the concept. Concept, right? Concept is the self-differentiating, universal concept of the concept. We can say like all concepts, whatever you want to think about, chairs, whatever, are understood in this concept of the concept or notion of the notion. And what this concept is simply the tripartite structure of universality, particularity, and individuality or singularity. And we understand this in a similar way that we understand the Trinity. God is universal. God and Jesus is particular. Jesus is individual. Holy Spirit is particular. Now, this is where the radical nature of this comes in. We have dissolved, Hegel wants us to dissolve the Christian thinking, the pictorial thinking of like, oh, God's like this like literal human guy. Like a lot of the Bible talks, it's very anthropomorphic of the absolute or God. And Hegel wants us to go, we are conceptualizing God outside of pictorial consciousness. And this actually occurs at the end of Phenomenology of Spirit, but he goes over this here too. It's very important. So the recognition that when you look at the following like the logic of the classic post-Nicene Trinity, when you look at God the Father, you're seeing Jesus and the Holy Spirit. When you look at Jesus, you're seeing God the Father and the Holy Spirit. Each determination contains the whole. And this is Hegel's point. Each determination, universality, particularity, individuality, all contain each other in the sense that we take a universal. That universal is a this universal. For instance, let's do Plato's example of greatness. Greatness is itself great. Okay, so it's a this great, all right? And greatness itself being great, that would automatically, as Parmenides recognizes, it would instantiate a boundless number of greats, of particular greats. That means that we have self-existentialized the particularity from the universal, and thereby that return from the particularity to the universal is the individuality. Or rather, what we have done, sort of like in the Trinity, whereby the return to heaven, Jesus' return to God, is the Holy Spirit, or it's the process by which the Holy Spirit comes about for Hegel, temporalized, right, and historicized. It's the same way that it works here, right? With the return of the greats, of all the boundless greats, to understand that greatness itself is great. This is the concept, the self-differentiating concept. And why this is important is because Hegel says that the concept is that which structures everything and all of that. We can also understand the concept in the same vein of universality, particularity, individuality, logos, nature, spirit. Logos, nature, spirit. Logos, the entirety of nature, spirit are in it. Nature, the entirety of spirit and logos are in it. Spirit, the entirety of spirit, the entirety of logos and nature are in it, right? I think I may have said that, but you know what I mean if you remember back at the last explanation of universality, particularity, individuality. Each determination is the whole is contained in each determination. So we've gone basically to the end now. We're at the recognition that there is this universe, there's this concept of the concept, and this concept of the concept for Hegel we can understand as the absolute. The absolute is that which is everything. The term could be the Neoplatonist one, you can say, or just like simply existence as such, right? Everything that exists, everything that will ever exist is in the absolute. The absolute is the totality of the world. It's not anything extra. There's not like a little cherry on top, right? That where there's God. No, the absolute for Hegel, God for Hegel, when he uses the word God, is itself the totality of the world. And the totality of the world is the concept. And the concept, and now we're moving on to what's known as the absolute idea, the final part of the science of logic. The concept has a being itself, right? But the concept also self-differentiates. We explain the notion through the greatness is great explanation. And what Hegel wants us to realize is that although the concept self-differentiates, because we've collapsed the notion of identity and difference through the reciprocal notion of causation, and through even back in the doctrine of being, where we recognize that being transitions over into nothing immediately. We've already collapsed the duality of identity and difference. So what Hegel says is that this idea of a concept of concept gives us all that we need for differentiation, for boundless differentiation. And the importance of this is that this leads us into the absolute idea, which we would understand for Hegel as thought thinking itself. Very similar to Aristotle's prime mover, thought thinking itself, or thought thinking of new ways to think itself. And this is the sort of totality of the world thought of as a divine sort of coming to be of something which has no end. This coming to be of the totality of the world, all things taken, is the absolute idea. And the absolute idea can only be understood by spirit. And this is why we come back to that to the tripartite notion of logos, nature, spirit, because the tripartite notion allows us to understand that only spirit can think the absolute idea. While the absolute idea exists, right? The idea exists in its unity with reality, meaning that the concept is not just the concept qua concept, but the concept is unified with everything existing, with reality, and that's the absolute idea. This coming to be of the absolute idea is simply everything that has ever existed. This is why Hegel says that in the philosophy of history is that history and the history of the world is the coming to be of reason. Reason for Hegel is boundless, right? We move beyond the notion in Kant where there's this stopping gap, this Grenz, in German would be the boundary, you can say. And we recognize that the reason is boundless, and this is the existence of the world. What Hegel gives us through this notion of the absolute idea is the ability to think nature, because only that which has thought only that which can think itself, being the unity of the absolute, in unity with the unity of the absolute with the concept, being the concept the absolute being the self-differentiated concept qua concept. What this gives us is, again, I'm slowing down here. What we're able to do is, once we are able to think about the absolute idea, think about this existence, think about this totality of the absolute that continues itself and proclaims towards something of which there is no end, an immanent teleological foundation, you can say. And this allows us to think nature. And I think a lot of times, a lot of the materialist Hegelians get reading Hegel wrong, but I do agree here, is that it seems that nature is the negation of spirit. right? And so only spirit can understand the absolute idea. The absolute idea exists. It exists, right? Whether or not spirit recognizes it. But for spirit to recognize the absolute idea, it implicitly recognizes nature as well. Thereby, spirit recognizing nature is the negation of spirit. And logos is simply spirit and nature taken together, thought of in each determination as a whole. And this brings us back to the end of the science of logic, whereby we have recognized where the self-differentiating universal of the concept, the concept qua concept, like the universality, particularity, individuality, self-differentiates, instantiates every single thing that has ever existed. And this is that divine power of the universe for Hegel. And that's going to be the science of logic in 15 minutes or about 16 minutes. But hey, that was pretty fun. I might do this again with phenomenology of spirit. I skipped a ton, right? Of course, I had to skip a ton of stuff. I didn't even talk about infinity, which I probably should have, because that's kind of required to understand the absolute. Okay. I mean, I have other videos where I discuss true infinity. And my video on self-consciousness, you can check that out. So anyways, that's going to be the end of the video. Go ahead and subscribe down below. And that was a wild ride, but we made it through.